There's a specific kind of silence that changes a room, not the peaceful kind, not the one that soothes or settles. This silence is the kind that happens right after someone crosses a line and realizes you're not going to say a word about it because it's not worth your voice anymore. You've spent years thinking respect is earned by patience, by kindness, by understanding. You kept telling yourself if you just explain better, forgive faster, give more, they'll see your worth. They didn't. They saw your silence as weakness, your forgiveness as permission, your generosity as compliance. And somewhere along the line, they stopped hiding it. They stopped hiding how little they respected you. That's the moment most people break. They either explode and become what they swore they wouldn't, or they shrink even further, still hoping someone will notice their quiet suffering. But there's a third response. Most don't know it exists. You don't yell. You don't chase. You don't prove. You become precise, controlled. Still, you stop trying to win back respect and start becoming someone they never deserved access to. Because respect isn't something you ask for. It's something people feel when they realize they can't play you. They only valued you when your value was theirs to consume, when you made their life easier, when you flattered their ego, when you absorbed the chaos. But when you stop doing that, when you stop explaining yourself, overextending yourself, performing likability, watch how fast the mask drops. Watch how quickly the love turns into leverage, the praise into punishment, the charm into control. They'll call you distant, arrogant, cold, but that's not what they fear. What they fear is that you've finally seen the truth and won't unsee it this time. You don't owe anyone access to your dignity. You don't negotiate your self-respect in exchange for temporary peace. If you've ever looked in the mirror after another night of betrayal and wondered why you keep giving people the benefit of the doubt, stay. We're going to unlearn the thing that's keeping you weak, and once you do, there's no going back. If you're tired of playing nice in a game that punishes honesty, subscribe, because the next part reveals everything. They don't lose respect when you make a mistake. They lose it the moment they realize you'll tolerate anything just to keep the peace. And peace isn't what you're keeping. You're keeping dysfunction comfortable. You're keeping manipulation undisrupted. You're keeping the illusion that this is love, that this is friendship, that this is teamwork. But deep down, you know exactly what it is. It's control, power, ego, disguised as connection. And the more you accommodate it, the more it devours you. It's not that people don't know they're disrespecting you. They know. But they also know you won't do anything about it, because the truth is brutal. They don't fear losing you. They don't believe you'll walk. They don't believe you'll detach. They don't believe you'll stop playing your role in their narrative. So they keep pushing. They test your silence. They measure your tolerance. And every time you excuse it with logic, with empathy, but maybe they didn't mean it, they learn something new about you. Not that you're kind, that you're afraid. Afraid of confrontation. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of finally saying, "This is the last time you ever speak to me that way." But they're not afraid to lose you, because they've never seen you leave when you should have. Until one day, you do. Not loud, not angry, not with a dramatic exit. Just gone. Your tone changes. Your responses shorten. Your availability disappears. And that's when something shifts. The panic sets in, not because they miss you, but because they miss the power they had over you. They missed the version of you that needed their approval, the version that stayed up all night overthinking a text, the version that rephrased every sentence to sound less intimidating, the version that apologized for having standards. When you stop doing that, you become unreadable. And the unreadable are powerful, because nothing scares a manipulator more than someone they can't provoke, someone who doesn't flinch, someone who looks them dead in the eyes and doesn't need to explain their silence. You want respect? It's not earned by proving how good you are. It's earned by showing how little of yourself you'll sacrifice for people who refuse to grow. But to do that, You'll have to stop feeding the fantasy that everyone means well. You'll have to accept that some people don't just cross boundaries, they study them. And if you don't enforce them, they don't just disappear. They move further and further into you until you don't know where you end, and their entitlement begins. Respect begins where self-abandonment ends. If you can sit with that, the next part will teach you what no one else dares to say. There's a game they play. You've seen it. They do something subtle, a dig, a shift in tone, a delayed reply laced with contempt. Nothing loud, nothing obvious, just enough to sting, but not enough to call out without sounding sensitive. And when you do call it out, they act confused. Why are you overreacting? That's not what I meant. Wow. I can't even joke with you anymore. That's the trap. The moment you feel something's off, they flip it. You're the problem now. You're the one ruining the vibe. You're too emotional, too controlling, too much. So you doubt yourself. You retreat. You swallow your instincts and blame your intuition. That's the first betrayal. Not what they did, but the moment you chose their comfort over your clarity, and they knew you would, because the game isn't about what's said, it's about what's allowed. They test your reaction. That's all. It's not the first insult that matters. It's the second one, the one they throw after you've already forgiven the first. Because now they know you're safe. Not emotionally safe, strategically safe. They can mess with your mind, bruise your ego, twist your reality, and you'll still show up the next day, trying harder. Because deep down, you don't want to believe they're doing it on purpose. You want to believe they're just bad at communicating. You want to believe it's your responsibility to fix the dynamic. And that's where you lose. Because every time you give the benefit of the doubt to someone who knows exactly what they're doing, you pay for it with your peace. They don't stop when you're hurt. They stop when they're exposed. And if you're always the one de-escalating, apologizing, smoothing things over, you're not mature. You're just the only one playing fair in a game rigged against you. You want respect? You have to stop explaining what they already understand. You have to stop clarifying your boundaries to people who study them like blueprints for exploitation. They're not confused. They're calculating. They don't need more of your words. They need less of your access. Because once you stop reacting, once you stop rewarding disrespect with continued attention, you change the entire dynamic. You become the mirror, and people hate mirrors when they're not proud of who they are. That's when they start calling you cold. Not because you hurt them, but because you stopped letting them hurt you. They'll say you changed, and they're right, because the old you would have apologized by now. But the new you isn't here to be decoded. The new you understands that silence isn't weakness. It's selection, and not everyone gets to be chosen. There's a moment that rewires you. It doesn't come with drama. No fight, no tears, no final straw, just a click. Quiet, internal, permanent. You hear someone speak the same way they always have. Same tone, same disrespect disguised as casual. The same dismissal of your time, your energy, your effort. But this time, it hits different, not because it hurts, because it doesn't. You're not angry. You're not wounded. You're not even surprised. You're done. That's the real shift. Not when you explode, but when you detach. When their validation means nothing. Their attention, worthless. Their approval, irrelevant. You're not playing anymore, and they feel it. They feel it in the way you don't chase the conversation, in the way your presence stops seeking theirs, in the way your eyes don't ask for anything. Because when you were needy, they were powerful. When you were generous, they were distant. When you gave everything, they gave just enough to keep you orbiting. But now you've remembered something lethal. You never needed them. You needed clarity. And once you have it, you see everything. The manipulation they called sarcasm. The avoidance they called boundaries. The selfishness they called self-awareness. All of it theater. And you were the audience paying the ticket price with your sanity. Now you're gone, and the show is empty. That's what they feel when they say you've changed. What they mean is, You're no longer emotionally available to be drained. You're no longer their emotional punching bag. You're no longer the backup plan, the emotional mule, the insurance policy. You've stopped playing the role they cast you in. And the silence that follows, it's not awkward, it's sacred. Because in that silence, you start to hear yourself again. Not the insecure version that needed their attention, the focused version, the calculating version, the version that doesn't explain their worth. They embody it. You don't owe a dramatic exit. You don't need revenge. The consequence is your absence. Let that be enough. Let them sit with the memory of someone they thought they could mistreat until that someone disappeared. Because that's what true self-respect sounds like. Nothing. They told you to be the bigger person. They meant be easier to manipulate. They meant don't react, don't challenge, don't make them uncomfortable with your standards. They said things like, you've changed, you're acting different, you're not as warm as you used to be, as if growth is betrayal, as if boundaries are disrespect, as if self-control is arrogance. What they really meant was, you stopped playing your part. They miss the version of you who second-guessed themselves before every sentence. They miss the version who thought silence kept the peace when really, it just protected the abuser. They miss your confusion, because that confusion made you obedient. Because when you were overthinking your every move, you weren't watching theirs. You didn't notice how they changed the subject every time you asked a real question. You didn't notice how your pain became a punchline. You didn't notice how they rewrote the past to justify the present. And when you did notice, you still gave them the benefit of the doubt because you couldn't stand the idea that someone could look you in the eyes, know exactly how much you cared, and still choose to use it. But now you've stopped explaining yourself. Now your tone has weight. Now your absence is louder than your presence used to be. And it's not because you're heartless. It's because you finally understand the difference between kindness and submission. You finally see that being available to everyone made you disposable to them. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. People who only respected distance. People who only appreciated what they couldn't control. People who only acted right when they feared losing access. You want real power? Let them feel the loss. Don't soften the silence. Don't over-explain the exit. Don't fill the gap they created. Let them sit with it, because this time, you're not coming back. They don't get to call you cold when they burned the bridge. They don't get to call you difficult when they depended on your silence. They don't get to rewrite the story when they tore out the pages of your patience and lit them on fire. You're not a villain. You're not a savior. You're not their emotional rehab center. You are the consequence. And the most powerful thing you can do? Disappear from their control, but live in their memory as the one who saw through it and walked away with nothing but clarity. They never expected you to leave. Not really. They expected you to flinch, to fold, to forgive again, because that's what you've always done. You gave grace to people who weaponized your empathy. You stayed longer than the lies did. You defended people who studied your weaknesses and used them as leverage. And even then, you still wanted to believe they meant well. That's the part they counted on. The war wasn't over who was right. It was over who would abandon themselves first. They just did it faster, more efficiently, with less guilt. You, on the other hand, bled slowly, quietly, while calling it love. But what they didn't see was the version of you that grew in the shadows. The version that watched everything, forgot nothing, and learned silently. You never needed closure. You needed conviction, and now that you have it, everything's different. You don't just walk differently. You listen differently. You don't listen to what people say anymore. You watch what they tolerate. You watch what they laugh at, what they justify, what they stay silent about when someone's being disrespected. You used to interpret silence as safety. Now, you know, silence is often complicity. You used to think over-explaining your pain would protect you from it. Now you see, the ones who need explanations are the ones who are never listening. You want respect? Stop asking for it. Start removing access. Start disappearing from the spaces where your loyalty is consumed not appreciated. Start looking people in the eye, the ones who think they know you, and say nothing, because silence is terrifying when it's not tied to insecurity, when it's deliberate, unemotional, final. That's when they panic. That's when they reach out with, "I miss the old you," but they never miss you. They miss the version of you that made their life easier. They miss your guilt, your explanations, your endless emotional labor. They miss the version that showed up, even when they didn't deserve it. And that version, dead. The new you doesn't explain, doesn't chase, doesn't accept proximity as proof of loyalty. The new you doesn't threaten to leave. They just notice everything and vanish. They move like consequence, still, cold, surgical, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. Because once you see it clearly, once you really feel it in your bones, there is no reason to stay where you are not respected, only patterns to break and power to reclaim. You were never weak. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to believe that. Because if you saw yourself clearly, if you stood in your own presence without apology, they'd lose their grip. So they made your strength look like stubbornness, your intuition look like paranoia, your standards look like ego. They framed your boundaries as betrayal because your distance disrupted their advantage. But now you don't respond the way you used to. You don't argue to prove a point. You don't open your heart to be dissected. You don't stand on trial in rooms where the verdict was decided before you even walked in. Because once you realize how much peace costs, you stop giving discounts. You stop explaining the difference between silence and submission. You stop letting people touch your energy just because they remember who you used to be. Because who you used to be is not here anymore. That version, the one who kept trying to be understood, the one who softened their voice so others felt strong, the one who smiled through the insult hoping it wasn't intentional, gone, not buried, not hidden, burned. And from that fire, something else emerged. Not louder, not meaner, not bitter, just untouchable. The kind of untouchable that doesn't entertain what it used to endure. You don't need to tell anyone. They feel it. They feel it when you don't flinch at the same patterns, when you don't reach out just to keep the connection alive, when your silence says what your voice no longer has to. They feel the shift, and it haunts them because they counted on your patterns. They bet on your softness. They assumed you'd always return. But you didn't just walk away. You leveled up in silence. You became what they always feared, someone who sees through them and doesn't need them. And that's when the apologies come, not from guilt, from loss, not because they've changed, but because you did. And by the time they notice, you're already gone. There's a moment in every powerful transformation that no one talks about. It's not the moment you walk away. It's not the final argument. It's not the last betrayal. It's the moment after, when your phone goes quiet, when the usual distractions, the ones that kept you entertained, entangled, emotionally high, suddenly disappear. That's when it hits. Not grief, not loneliness. Power. Real, unnerving power. The kind that doesn't ask for company. The kind that doesn't chase closure. The kind that doesn't need an audience. It's quiet, it's cold, and it's clean. No guilt, no second guessing, no fantasies about what could have been. Just presence. You stop romanticizing the past. You start auditing it. You see how many times you twisted your own standards just to maintain a connection. How many times you played humble while someone else played superior. How many times you apologized, not because you were wrong, but because you feared distance. Now you welcome distance. You understand that space reveals truth, because the people who loved your weakness vanish when you find your strength. They don't know how to talk to you anymore. Your stillness unnerves them. Your detachment disrupts them. Your indifference exposes what was never real, and still they try. They send bait, memories, jokes, half apologies, unfinished conversations. You don't bitter. You don't explain your silence, because the most powerful move isn't to destroy them, it's to unrecognize them, to look at the person who once had you wrapped around their chaos and feel nothing, not because you've become heartless, but because you finally understand. They were never your mirror. They were your lesson, a brutal, beautiful lesson in how much you lose when you abandon yourself trying to be enough. You were never too much. They were just never full enough to appreciate substance. And now you don't ask for respect. You embody it through absence, through standards, through refusal. You don't block them to punish. You block them to protect the peace they never earned. You don't explain your exit. You enforce it. You don't wait for recognition. You walk like someone who already has it from themselves. This is who you are now, unapologetic, measured, unshakable, not because you learned how to win their game, but because you stopped playing altogether. And when they finally realize what they lost, you won't even be watching.